Hi, everybody. Abby here, bringing you a short preview of our May bonus episode. For Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, Sarah and I watched 1948's Spring in a Small Town. If you like what you hear and want more, come on over to patreon.com/lightscameraaccolade. You can catch the full episode there, in addition to a bunch of other as of yet unreleased to the public bonus episodes, and much, much more. Thanks for listening.
First of all, I immediately loved that it was really, truly, intimately through a woman's point of view.
Yes.
What a breath of fresh air from the era that we're in the mainstream movies. And even just in general, I feel like so many movies are just almost by default male-centric or male point of view, even when you don't get like an actual voiceover, internal thoughts and stuff. But I really loved it. And I know that the suffering wife is kind of a trope, and it's especially popular in Chinese literature, and I'm assuming movies as well. The Good Earth obviously was not written by a Chinese writer, but she did live in China for a long time. And I feel like the whole character of Olan in The Good Earth is that, right? It's just like the emphasis on duty, what makes a good wife. So here, I really loved that while on the surface, like that is also her, right? And her husband even talks about that, about how she is a dutiful and good wife, the best that there is, et cetera, et cetera. But he can recognize that she's not happy, which is one step above the Good Earth main character.
Yeah, like he specifically has that line where he's like, the kinder she is, the colder she is.
Yes. Oh my God. And that too, we'll have to get on that, the poetry of some of these lines in here. But just like, imagine if we heard the thoughts of Olan in The Good Earth and how different it would be. Because I loved here that yes, on the surface, she's doing everything she's supposed to, but we get that firsthand perspective of the uncertainty and the unhappiness and the melancholy that she just kind of lives each day with. So just really, really loved all of that.
Yeah. And I love how there's something very specific about the style of narration, because it's never just like always her internal thoughts. Like there's kind of an omniscient quality to it as well. Like,
right. Like a narration almost.
Yeah. Like narrative text in a book almost, where it's very much her perspective, but she's talking about things that she doesn't necessarily have any way of knowing, especially when she's like narrating actions that are happening.
Yes.
But it's just really lovely and effectively done. I feel like, at least for me, I rarely meet narration in a movie that I really love, but this is so thoughtfully done and really interesting in terms of like tone. And two, like, because so much of the setting of it is that post-war trauma and destruction, both in the sense of these people's lives, but also in like the literal home that's falling down around them or has fallen down around them. And now they're not even staying in the main house anymore. They're staying in ancillary rooms in the garden, and the city wall that they keep walking alongside that's kind of tumbled down. There's that weird kind of almost like that narrative quality is looking back, even though that's not really what it is. It has that weird, like, pulled out of time kind of perspective, which is really interesting.
Yes. No, I adore it. Like, I think the narration throughout this is very beautiful. In my notes, I have several notes about it, just like how well done. Because obviously we have seen internal monologue in some of our other movies, and it's never done well, I would argue, so far. But in here, you're exactly right that it's more like narration in a novel. And it's kind of two things, because one, it does feel a little bit like omniscient, but it does also, I think, lend an idea that this character is very observant, very emotionally intelligent, and kind of these are all things that are going on below the surface, like kind of like a still waters run deep sort of vibe, with her perspective kind of centering out through it. Because when she introduces each character, you kind of also get a little bit of her perspective on that character, but it's also very revealing. Like, it feels like she is correct and like correctly getting to the core of who these people are. And there was also a line early on, just speaking of the poetry of some of these thoughts, when she's reflecting on her husband who believes he has tuberculosis and is just very kind of, if anything, a little bit of a hypochondriac, which we love to see a male character with hypochondria because
Truly
it's always like treated like it's like a women's illness. So she is reflecting on how he has changed over time and how he focuses on his illness that he perceives that he has and how it holds him back from doing anything or trying anything. And that one, you're getting the sense of that is kind of like the root cause of her losing respect for him and stuff. But she has the line, "I'm afraid to die. He seems afraid to live." And it's just like, oh man, okay. Like, so I was immediately just kind of like really locked in. And I like that it was intimate. There's only 5 characters total. We stay with them the whole time.
Great. Love to see a small scope chamber drama.
Which, on that note, too, I feel like there's so many things to kind of pick at here. But the set, also the home that they're all inhabiting, I feel like the more that the drama kind of ratchets up, the more claustrophobic it kind of feels, even though it's only 5 of them in this fairly large estate. But circling back to the little sister, she also, even though she's just turned 16 in this movie, very observant, emotionally intelligent. You know, she is a little bit more fun-loving. She's not as touched by the war or anything. But the final scene, like you can see when she's watching people and she's kind of
so many
noticing
great scenes of her
so
watching.
many things.
Especially like the scene where they are drinking and singing and like Ewan is having fun for the first time, essentially in a long time. Yeah. And you can like see her in the background, like clocking the connection between Ewan and Shijen. It's so good.
It's so good. And I also love that when pretty much in one of the final scenes, after it's clear that Ewan is going to stay with her husband, the little sister kind of pulls her aside and very like intentionally holds her hand and walks her away from the table to kind of like pull her in to the conversation she wants to have with her and asks her pretty straight up, like, "Are you in love with Zhang?" And Yuan at that point, even though she had lied to the husband earlier or avoided it, here she is honest with her. And instead, you can kind of tell that the little sister, when she hears that yes, is almost like heartbroken for her sister-in-law, because it's just like, wow, that sucks. You know, that sucks that, you know, that you're in the position that you're in and everything. Like they actually embrace at that point too, where it's just like the connection between the women and the emotional intelligence between the women. Really, really nice to see, especially considering many of the female characters that we see in a lot of other movies around this time period. So, it's so good.
And the longing.
the longing, but also the passive aggressiveness of Yuan at this point too, because she goes from, you know, very withdrawn, cold, but still waters run deep. I'll use that term again, where she has all these thoughts, but then when Zhang comes back into the picture and slowly they start reconnecting and everything, she then starts becoming a little bit passive aggressive. She's manipulating everyone, right, into feeling a certain way about things. You get the sense that it is because of her own frustration at being in this position, right, of uncertainty. But it was also funny where I was just like, oh no, you should not have activated her. She is too powerful for you guys. Like she's going to get what she wants, you know, in the way of being able to kind of manipulate, especially her husband and Zhang, the love interest in this. And then I do just want to say, I felt bad for everyone in this movie, ultimately, because it's just like, no one really asked for things to end up this way. And the husband, even prior to Zhang or Ji Chen, but him, like, you can just tell how much he loves his friend. You know, Ji Chen is just such a, like, charismatic, kind guy. He was involved in the fighting, like, they reference specifically the areas, and I'm assuming Manchuria. They list out a lot of cities where he's been when he's been away at the war and everything, versus the husband was a refugee instead, as part, like, the wealthy son of his family and everything. And so, I don't know, you just get the sense of like, there's a lot of respect and love there. And that doesn't even go away with the drama, because at the same time, you see in that same scene where everyone's drinking and he can see Yuen is happy for the first time too, you also see it in his face that he like realizes. And it's not, there's like a sadness there, but not the typical anger or a jealousy or anything like that. Like he just wasn't a bad dude. No one here is a bad person. It's pretty much the takeaway that I had from it anyway. And also the butler, such a sweetheart.
Yeah. Great fifth wheel. I don't even know what you would call that, but like just great, like kind of background added flavor, really bringing a lot to the scenes.
The adult in the room.
Kind of going back to what you were talking about in terms of like Yuen's manipulativeness is, I think the thing that's really interesting is, and you alluded to that a little bit, but the fact that she doesn't, not that she doesn't know that she's doing it, but she doesn't understand why she's doing it, or she can't quite
kind of like lashing out or
work
something.
through it. Yeah, exactly. It's all like symptomatic of the turmoil that she's experiencing.
Yeah,
like the scene where she talks about her husband, essentially everything being better if he just died, and she was like, "Why would I say that? I've never even thought about that before." And just kind of grasping at straws. It's just really a really interesting thing of like all these characters kind of on the surface trying to act really respectably, and then below the surface having all of these feelings, and you get it a lot from her because you do have that narration, but that's a thing that's obviously happening for all these characters. That scene where I think it's after they've had that night of drinking and no one can sleep, and she goes to go get sleeping pills from her husband and he's already given them away, but that scene shot from like inside the netting or the curtain of the bed with him, and it like you can just see how upset he is, and you also can tell like she is upset, and that thing of her being kind of cold and emotionally distant because potentially like she's feeling too many things. And just how it's shot is really beautifully done in terms of the curtain like separating and then briefly having that contact and then her slipping away. It's really lovely.
Yeah, I feel like in a way there's just a lot of frustration for all of the characters, but no like clear person or thing to really direct it at, because everyone is just kind of grasping around in the dark at this point in history and at this point in their lives, where it's like it's no one's fault, but I'm angry. You know, like that sort of vibe.
Especially in like a post-war thing of the thing that's at fault here is really like the destruction of these people's homes and livelihoods and welfare of like, so the thing that they could be angry at, which is, you know, the war, is not a thing that is in the room with them, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to just how effective the setting is in keeping that ever present in the same way that it is ever present in their lives. Because you just have like a lot of walls with holes in them, a lot of messed up architecture, some like broken stuff everywhere. And it's not just in their home or on their estate. It's, as you mentioned, the city wall. It's this entire region that still has like the visual markers of the war that they just kind of got through. And you even hear it sometimes with like the sound design. If they're walking through like the estate and stuff, you'll hear kind of like the crumbly rock type sound, or having to clumsily walk over things that are broken and in disrepair. And it's never something, well, I guess the one time that they really draw attention to it is in the introductory scenes with the characters, because you actually see the husband very kind of like futilely trying to repair a hole in their big wall, and he's just kind of stacking loose bricks and stuff. And then later when Ji Chen comes, he goes specifically to the back wall, because I guess that's where, as a kid, he probably always would come in. He's very familiar with the estate. And then he just kind of walks straight through that hole, which I feel like there's probably something there, too, in terms of...
There's a metaphor there.
There's a metaphor there. There's definitely a metaphor there somewhere. But that is, I feel like, the one time that there's very specific and like explicit attention brought to the state of disrepair of some of that stuff. And then I was just thinking, in terms of like performances and stuff, one, I think everyone was really, really lovely in this. And I caught myself in the middle of the movie being like, if we weren't hearing Yuen's thoughts, would I still feel as connected to the character, or would I still read a lot of her uncertainty? Like, is it acting, or is it just because we get so much insight through literal monologuing, right? So I paid like really close attention to that actress. So I believe her name was Wei Wei.
Yeah, I think
but
you're
she
right.
genuinely does a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Like her facial expressiveness, her body language. Even if we did not hear this woman's thoughts literally throughout the movie, I think we would have absolutely still picked up on the melancholy, the sadness, the frustration. What a wonderful actress. And I found out she lived until like 2001.
God damn.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, what? Pretty crazy.
That's wild.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. Even more than that. She lived until 2023.
What? How old was she?
Well, she was 101 when she passed away.
That's crazy.
So she would have been 26. I'm doing some quick. Yeah, she was 26 years old when doing this movie and then lived to 101.
God damn. That's wild.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy.
Also crazy because, like, I don't know. I know we talk about this and we're kind of getting into the generations of people where I've seen them in movies before. But
yeah.
It's weird how the silent movies that we were watching feel like 1,000 years old.
Right.
And
like Time of Dinosaurs. Yeah.
Yeah. Time of Dinosaurs. And we're slowly kind of getting into the place where it's like, no, a lot of these people, I mean, they were alive recently. A lot of them aren't alive anymore, but like, no, they were alive recently.
It's so crazy. I know. I'm still, even though we've started doing like the reincarnation roulette and stuff, I'm still at the stage where it's hard to comprehend that we are so close to this period in time. Mm-hmm. So it's crazy. So especially when you have like, this wasn't a child actor, it's one thing when we're like, oh, this baby is still alive, versus like, no, she was a grown woman, and she was still alive 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
That's crazy.
But yeah, no, she's specific. I think she was my favorite in terms of just like character, her acting, everything about her. Would love to see more movies with her if she was in more movies.
Yeah. And like, really, just going back to your first point of having a movie that's so firmly from a woman's perspective is so refreshing.
Yes.
I think that there's something really interesting going on in the costuming of this movie, and it could be that it's like totally normal. But the Chipao dresses that she and Xiu are wearing are really fashion history interesting, just because they're really like plain style Chipao, like they're like plain fabric and that kind of thing. They're very kind of, I guess technically this will be a sneak peek, but in our last mainline episode that we recorded talking about kind of the austerity of fashion, and a lot of the Chipao of this period were also kind of a austerity move from originally they started as Manchuria garments, and kind of through time they kind of got slimmer and slimmer, and part of that is just like Western fashion influences, but a lot of it is also because of wartime having limited resources, and like you can cut those dresses essentially you use basically every inch of fabric on a length of fabric, and it's just really interesting to see that weird in between period of these Manchuria garments slowly becoming westernized, and also having the austerity measures in place as well. Originally those sleeves, like if they were a long sleeve garment, they would have been a lot more wide, but hers are really narrow into her wrist. Just cool.
That is super cool. Okay, so that is not exactly what I was going to point out, but it's aligned. So I'm glad. I feel like you just have a better eye for things. The main question that I had too was wondering kind of like what the significance is that Ji Chen is the only one who's really wearing Western style clothing. Like he's mostly in a suit and tie. And obviously he's been moving around, traveling around. He studied medicine, etc. Versus the Dai family, the husband Leon is in traditional wear. And then everyone there at the household is still in that kind of traditional wear as well. So that was something that I was really curious about.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Good, cool point.
Yeah, like past versus future, tradition versus change. And then also just like, I mean, a lot of that fashion is tied to the broader global scale, war, and just everything that's changing for good and for bad. So I was just curious about that. But he's the only one who wears it.
Yeah, that is interesting. Good point. thinking.
It's just good. I feel like there are a lot of like really nice touches in all of this.
Yeah.
I also liked the singing. I think the little sister was actually a very talented singer. And so they kind of had, several scenes where they sing more like traditional or contemporary type songs. Cause I know one of them also referenced like an Ivan Dodart or something. Cause I was like, okay, this is clearly a Soviet sort of recognition here. Cause we're just coming out of the war in which the USSR were allied, But it just reminded me too of the scene that I wanted to point out just in terms of the acting for everyone involved and just the certain way that things are filmed and what's being focused on screen. When they go on their first kind of outing, the four of them, and they're on their boat, and the husband and the younger sister are singing the song like super happy, just having a lovely day, floating the river and rowing down this river. And then in the background, you see Yuen she's rowing, but it looks like she is mentally somewhere else. And then Ji Chen at this point, who is still not even certain like how long he's going to stay, if he should leave, because he also has a respect for his friend, doesn't want to ruin this marriage, etc. So they look so serious, and like Ji Chen looks so anxious. And then meanwhile in the front, you've got the brother and sister just like, what a lovely day that we're having on the boat.
Two very separate sides on this boat.
Very, very different ideas of what's going on here before they finally kind of start actually watching and catching on more. I think a lot of times narratively, that sort of thing is there to kind of paint people as oblivious. But I feel like here it felt more like both a trust of just like, well, of course they wouldn't do that, but also just not really knowing her as well, because she's not sharing any of her doubts, seemingly have been going on for a long time with either of them, right? So she is, as the husband later says, distant,
pretty estranged at that point, because like she goes into town and he goes in the garden and they basically never see each other.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like estranged, but there's this assumption that like she's a good wife. You don't even have reason to be suspicious.
I feel like there's just, this is going to be one of those ones that I think about for a long time, because there's a lot going on there. And in terms of parallels and interesting, and part of it is like, I don't even know some of the references. Like, I would guess this has some Confucianism stuff buried in here somewhere. But I just don't know enough about that to really speak on it at this second. But I would be really interested to see if there's some paper out there written about it.
It feels like scholarly work has been done.
It feels like there's something going on there that I just don't quite have the capacity to get my arms around. But
for sure, we don't have that context or anything naturally. I mean, we didn't even know basically any details about the war leading up to this. So definitely a gap in knowledge, but it was genuinely beautiful, I thought. And like I said, just from our perspective and the Hays Code and the way that female characters are treated in Western media, this was just like so nice.
You know what I do also want to talk about is this movie has a really fascinating use of sound. We've talked about it a little bit in terms of you mentioning the sounds of the building crumbling, but that kind of things in motion soundscape is pretty constant. Like even when they're out in nature, like walking paths and that kind of stuff, there's like a sound of wind through the trees. And there's also multiple points within the movie where the sound basically drops out. Like no almost music like or anything like that, movie, but it kind of takes on that like more silent, only visual storytelling. No, like, because it's not even like silent where you have some guy on a player piano rocking out to give you context. It's like it's fully silent. There's like no music, nothing. And like maybe that's the print we were watching. I don't know, hard to say. But I don't think it is. It just feels really effective to go like fully quiet in places. It's really interesting because it's usually like in points of high emotion, like when she's in his room and he's left and closed the door on her and she like puts her hand through the door and hurts her hand.
Breaks a window. I feel like, it's often in sequences where if this were a Max Steiner score, he'd be going up to 11.
Yeah, the score would be going crazy. We get
silence.
It's really a fascinating choice and I think very effective.
Yeah, and I think to me, I feel like unless it's the print, which I don't think it is. I think that has to be maybe even stylistic differences in filmmaking, potentially when to go silent versus when to have music. And I don't know how much of that might be different also in like Chinese opera or stage plays or anything like that at the time. I just don't have that knowledge. But I do know the other thing about the sound of this movie, because even though this is 1948, which is technically ahead of where we are in our mainstream Oscars podcast, it didn't have like a traditional score or kind of what we're a little bit more used to or growing more used to in film, which is a little bit more similar to modern times. And I found out that the film recording process in China at the time was still a little bit behind in terms of optical sound versus magnetic sound recording. And so everything is on the same single channel, whether that's like music, dialogue, etc. So that's kind of why you don't get as much of even what we've seen in some early American films. Like I think even Hallelujah, what we had watched for African American History Month, when you get things like the sounds from off screen and stuff, you don't really get that here as much because it's just like it's all mixed in one channel. So it sounds like everything's kind of coming from the same direction. But because of those limitations too, all of the singing and everything that we're hearing is all live, and that's what we're watching and listening to. So thought that was pretty cool. But on that note, I feel like the voiceover then was probably just over silent portions of the movie. Yeah. And they just had like that sound stripped in. But yeah, just thought that was interesting that even though this is almost at this point 1950, they were still working with different kind of limitations.
Wow, when you kill a couple million people.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Let's see what else to say about this movie. I feel like, again, there's just so much to talk about, but it's all like very subtle stuff where it's like hard in an oral medium to like, this scene specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
But
maybe if we incorporated like actual video and stuff, which we're also working with limitations here as well.
Yeah.
Largely limitations with the editor. But
who is that person?
Who does that? Oh, during our break, I was kind of reflecting on this because obviously with the little bit of a history spiel, it is kind of curious to me because it's not long after this movie where the Red Scare really amps up in the US. And so China, along with, the USSR, become to some degree like enemy number one, even though at this time, and obviously in World War II, we were all technically allied, right, against Germany, against the Axis powers. And I remember when researching The Good Earth, like when we watched that movie, that adaptation, that it was really popular in the US and there was like a lot of feelings of camaraderie with US citizens at the time, seeing the lives of poor Chinese farmers going through some of the things that they had gone through with the Dust Bowl, right? There was like this shared kind of experience and humanity there. And I would have to think that this movie too is just so familiar, so human, so lovely that I think had it been screened in the US, I think it also would have elicited very similar sentiments of just like, we're all the same. So I'm very curious, though, because it's around this time that there's going to be more emphasis on trying to define these cultures as anti-American versus, what is actually really present in a lot of the storytelling that I think people would have really loved at the time. So it's just kind of unfortunate how quickly those things were decided. And then, fast forward however many years and decades, and so much of that still kind of lingers to today.